Our final panel today is going to look at interfaith and cross-communal relations in the digital age. This might even be the most important discussion that we're having here today, since solutions to anti-Semitism can only be found by building strong interfaith ties with allies against hate. Well, with us, we have the head of faith-based partnerships at Facebook, Nonna Jones, the president of the Union of the Italian Jewish Community, Noemi Di Segni, the advisor to the mayor for tolerance and counteract xenophobia in Wrocław, Poland, Bartolomew Kiajenski, and Lord Provost of Edinburgh, Frank Ross. So let's start our discussion. Ms. Jones, why don't you begin? Perhaps you can start by telling us a bit about your own personal story and how you got involved in promoting faith-based partnerships on Facebook.
Sure. Well, interestingly enough, so I work for this major tech company, but my husband and I, we actually pastor a local church in Florida. And so part of the reason why I was asked to take this role is that I do understand the role that faith plays in the life of people on a daily basis. And so my role and the role of my team is really to bring the power and the capacity that Facebook has as a global convener and connector of people of faith to the people who practice faith both online and offline. And it's been a joy and a pleasure, especially over the last year, to be able to help so many houses of worship that in the absence of Facebook and other social technology platforms would have had to close their doors both physically and online.
Now, on this note, Ms. Di Segni, in Italy, what types of interfaith initiatives exist to promote ties between Jews and other religious groups?
Thank you very much. So in Italy, there is a very special situation as minorities, but also the Christian church, are recognized on the basis of a law. So you have a special agreement with the state of Italy, and for the Jewish people, it has been signed in '89, recognizing that specific group from a legal point of view. And this is very important as it sets a special situation that you are the interlocutor of all the Italian institutions at the higher level, representing Jewish Italian in my case, but also for all the other religious minorities. And this has, of course, different implications. So this is a very specific Italian situation, but this law recognizes freedom of religion. Our challenge after 30 years of that law is to go much further and not only have protection, recognition, but also to be active players in civil society. It's not only us, it's together, and play a sort of a non-religious role by religious faith and by religious people. So how can we be useful with our tradition, cultural heritage, moral values of support to civil society? So it means methods of education, participating at some political agenda, and of course the issue of anti-Semitism is a fundamental issue. I must say, and I'm sorry if I take the opportunity of my short speaking, is that sadly today our two mayors from Italy, from Bologna and from Palermo, have decided, because of pressure that they received politically from Palestinians group, not to attend this important summit. And so this doesn't have to do with religious issues, but we have to understand how Jewish people are perceived also by institutional society. And this is really the challenge, that's why we are here. And our challenge is to defend the situations also with other minorities and not alone.
All right, we're going to turn now to Mr. Kiajenski. Your city of Wrocław had a large Jewish community that was mostly destroyed during the Holocaust. What is being done today to enshrine the city's Jewish history and foster contemporary Jewish life there?
Good evening, thank you for having me. Let me start with a poem by the Nobel Prize winner from Poland, Wisława Szymborska, entitled Hate. Quote, "See how efficient it still is, how it keeps itself in shape, our centuries' hatred, end of quote. The power of hatred is terrifying. The history of effects is terrifying. It's even more, for me, terrifying if we don't remember about it. Memory is very important to us in Wrocław. This is why the mayor of Wrocław, current and previous, always participates in the celebration commemorating the anniversary of Kristallnacht on the 9th of November. And the memorial march on this day is the only march, only public gathering which the president of Wrocław takes part every year. Secondly, this is why we have the Education in Memorials program. This education project involves trips of pupils to places such as Grossrosen, Bełżec, Auschwitz, or other places of the Holocaust. The program provides students preparation for trips. There are classes, workshops where the history of places is learned, a discussion about respect and tolerance, the lack of respect and tolerance, and the consequences that follow. Therefore, we take in Wrocław, we take care of our district of mutual respect. This is district which boundaries are marked by the streets where there are Catholic Church, Orthodox Church, Evangelical Church, and synagogue. For us, it symbolizes the religious and cultural diversity and tolerance of Wrocław. It is currently, for me, in my opinion, one of the most beautiful parts of the city, and certainly the most vibrant place in Wrocław. It is our apple of the eye. We must remember, and it's our duty also of local authorities to remind about history, to remind about also painful history. Thank you.
Now, Lord Ross, I'd like to turn to you. Edinburgh, Scotland is a diversity that is home to people of many cultures and religions. As head of the city, what do you do to promote strong interfaith relationships among your constituents?
Well, firstly, I work on a daily basis with all key religious leaders in all quarters of our city, both in terms of involving them equally in the civic life of the city, and indeed by representing the city at their major events. We have within the city a very strong interfaith association which represents all religions within the city, and indeed no religion as well, which can be just as important. And they progress a number of initiatives. I'm patron of that association. They work very closely with our schools and our teachers, bringing expert panels into the schools to discuss various aspects of religion and provide a significant amount of online resource in the form of videos or rituals and discussions about rituals, and indeed bring the arts and the music to the various elements of faith. We also have a substantive number of civic events that we have within the city, and I visit in a civic form each religion at least once a year to their place of worship and participate in their full rituals, and in particular with the Jewish community, that we work very closely with them. We invite religious leaders to come into our council to speak directly to councillors once a month on rotation, so that we hear a balanced view of what's happening throughout our city. But our local Jewish community, and I have to say we have some excellent members of our community there, but in particular, Emeritus Professor Joe Goldblatt has been very proactive in their shared design of innovative and interactive program called Joe's Boxes, which is Jewish Objects for Education in Scotland. And they actually take a box of Jewish artifacts and religious elements into schools and explain to young people up to the age of 11 years old what these mean. and the importance to different faiths. So it's already been commented that education is key. And I think that's the best thing that we can do. We can educate and we can be inclusive. We treat religions as one group, as part of the normal society, and include them in the same way as we include everybody else.
Well, it's very, very interesting what you're saying. You know, we've been talking right now a lot about what needs to happen on the ground to promote interfaith alliances. But Ms. Jones, I'd like to turn back to the internet. You know, how can Facebook be used as an effective tool to build cross-religious bonds? And can you also give us some examples of its success in doing this so far?
Oh, absolutely. Well, so I joined Facebook back in 2017. It just so happened that Mark changed the mission of our company. That's why I was asked to join the company. The company initially focused on connecting friends and family, but then I think once we crossed the 2 billion user threshold, Mark had a bit of an epiphany where he realized that our company had the potential to do so much more. And so our mission was changed to give people the power to build community and bring the world closer together. And I think that mission really has become the springboard for the work that we do in order to support the faith ecosystem globally. So, you know, I was asked to join the company, not in spite of my faith, but because of my faith, because I think there was a recognition that 84% of the world identifies with a faith community. And so some of the things we have seen concretely, as an example, over this last year, there was a Facebook group that launched, and it was created by a rabbi in Atlanta, Georgia, here in the United States of America. But it was termed an Interfaith communal response to COVID-19. And that group has grown to tens of thousands of clergy across faiths who simply want to learn from each other how to support their local community, how to support their members, and how to leverage Facebook as a mechanism for convening. And I think that's really the power of technology is you're no longer limited to a building, to a date, to a time. It really allows you to impact people's lives for the better 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And so we see that happening across faiths. We see that happening around the world. And it's been really inspiring to see.
Well, I think that's the beauty of the internet, right? Globalization, we're able to all connect to each other across the border, no matter where we're from. Now, I'd like to turn back to you, Ms. DeSegni. What is the greatest challenge today for Italy specifically in terms of promoting interfaith tolerance and fostering multiculturalism?
Thank you. So, as I mentioned, the answer is to try not only to fight the darkness, but to bring light. Mm-hmm. So our challenge is to try to share Jewish culture with other community leaders of other religions, and not only, of course, also with civil society in the broad sense, but to make people understand that Jewish culture is part of the Italian culture, is part of their interests. And really the mission is to try to do that from the very, starting with very, very small children, even at kindergarten. So trying to play together, to make bread together among women from different religions, doing small things in daily life and showing that we can really live together one aside the other, and not only challenging the real huge, big without answer that we have as question marks for our existence. Of course, we do our best also at an institutional level in our lives as private persons. But if we focus the tiny, small thing for tiny children and we start there, I am sure we can do a lot.
It's so essential what you're saying. Really, thank you for that comment. I'd like to turn back to you, Mr. Siaginski. What initiatives has your city engaged in to protect minorities there?
We are guided by words of Michael Bloomberg, former mayor of New York. He used to say and repeat it often, nation speaks, cities act. So in Wrocław, the most important and first, what I would like to say is about education, of course. In Wrocław, we try to disseminate knowledge about the other with campaigns, with lessons, with workshops. For example, we have preparations classes for foreign children where they can fully prepare for education in Polish schools. It is rare. It is rare in Poland because schools are limited here to 2 additional Polish language lessons per week for foreign children. We know that it's far not enough. We know that, and we are trying to give more in our city. Secondly, we have a zero tolerance policy towards hate speech. When it comes to fighting against hate speech, we believe that there is a lot of room for local authorities, especially if the government is not eager to act. In this area, it is necessary, and I'm talking about this as a lawyer, it is necessary to use the law willingly, skillfully, and with courage.
Right.
That is why in Wrocław, me personally, on behalf of the president of Wrocław, interrupt demonstrations with hate speech and with anti-Semitism. And the courts agree with us in this policy. We have sentences that confirm that this is fully proper and fully legal. This is unique. This is also unique action in Poland. This is very important because we have had serious anti-Semitic incidents in the last decade. For example, in 2013, a local nationalist prevented Professor Zygmunt Baumann's lecture at the university. Then in 2015, whole world could see an anti-Semite burn an effigy of Jew in the market square in Wrocław during a demonstration. It was huge and sad for us. And now, me with the assistance of the city police, not national police, city police and few clerks, that there is no hate speech, and national police.
Mr. Kiajinsky, I'm sorry, but it looks like we're having a bit of a connection issue, so I'm going to move back to you, Lord Ross. We haven't forgotten about you. You know, Edinburgh has a small but a very historic Jewish community. As Lord Provost, what is your role in ensuring that Jews in Edinburgh are not only protected, but that anti-Semitic incidents are dealt with seriously when they occur?
Well, as Lord Provost, I don't have any direct responsibility in terms of application of the law. I leave that to my colleagues in the Scottish Parliament in concert with Police Scotland. But in Scotland and in Edinburgh, we have a suite of legislation which makes it very clear that any form of racism towards groups who celebrate their traditional heritage or religious practice is against the law. And that any complaints received will be fully investigated and prosecuted. A big issue, like many areas such as this, is people's unwillingness to come forward and to make the complaint. And that's something that I promote on a regular basis, that actually making the complaint gives us the ability to actually root out the problem and deal with it. While it's kept underground, it is so much more difficult to actually get to the root of that. And perhaps that's never been more so in the case of digital, the digital age, when people are online and it's a lot easier to hide while being quite vicious. But my colleagues in the Scottish Parliament have in the last few days passed new legislation, which is consolidating our existing laws, but it's also created a new offence of stirring up hatred. Now, until this recent law, that was restricted purely to race. That has now been expanded to cover religion as well, and that's a major step forward. But as Lord Provost, the two key elements that I get involved with on a day-to-day basis are education and inclusion. Hatred of any sort, whether it be race or religion, people are not born with hatred. People are educated, people are taught, and therefore it's a constant battle for us. And it is constant. I don't see an end to it, but we have to work hard to educate people to show that that is not the way of a civilized society. Inclusion is just as important to ensure that groups, while retaining their own uniqueness, their own religious beliefs, their own heritage, are actually part of our community. And in Edinburgh, we're fortunate in that we're world renowned for our festivals. And yet the founder of our festival back in 1947 was an Austrian Jew, Rudolf Bing, who we commemorate every year. So it's, for us, it's part of our DNA, of our culture and our society. But education and inclusion, every day we've got to continue to be involved and deliver those.
They seem to be the two most popular terms during this panel. Thank you to all of our panel members for enlightening us today with your unique perspectives on these vital topics. Only together can we defeat anti-Semitism and all forms of religious hatred and intolerance. Well, now we're going to hear remarks from the director of the European Union Agency for Fundamental Rights, Michael O'Flaherty.
I'm very pleased to have the opportunity to address the 2021 Mayors' Summit against Anti-Semitism. And I warmly thank the Combat Anti-Semitism movement and the City of Frankfurt for this invitation. Anti-Semitism is a serious problem in our societies, and it's getting worse. This is not just a problem for the Jewish community, it is a problem for all of us. It's a challenge to the values on which we base our societies, our communities. And here in Europe, if we fail our Jewish community, then we have failed as the modern European project. We at the Fundamental Rights Agency know that the situation is getting worse through our surveys. In 2018, we published major survey results, having engaged with over 16,000 Jewish people from across 12 EU member states. They told us a dispiriting story. They told us of deeply disturbing levels of harassment, discrimination, even violence. They told us stories of not reporting incidents because they don't have confidence in the state to investigate. They told us about worrying levels of people thinking about emigrating from Europe. We saw also that the situation of children, or young people at least, was notably worse than that for older people. During 2020, things got even worse in the COVID context. Thanks to the Anti-Defamation League, we're aware of hideous, shocking calumnies perpetrated on social media against Jews, blaming them, for instance, for the spread of the virus. Now, there's much that we need to do and there's much that we can do to push back against anti-Semitism. It engages everybody in our societies. But central to the effort must be cities. Cities are in the front line, if you will, of the fight against anti-Semitism. Now, cities across our countries have wildly differing mandates, responsibilities, resources, and authorities. But nevertheless, there are at least 4 things that we can do together, regardless of which city we're in the fight against anti-Semitism. The first of these is to either gather the data on what's going on or support the gathering of the data. We know from our work that this is an area of great weakness, at least here in Europe, where in some countries, very little effort at all is made. So cities can either do it or support the doing of it. Have a look, for example, at what's happening in the city of Bordeaux, which has some good practice in this regard. Second, we've got to tackle anti-Semitism in ourselves, in our administrations. We've got to make sure that our offices, our departments are anti-Semitism-free zones. This we do through an investment in awareness raising, in training, in challenging, in identifying the hidden biases across our workforces. We also have to do it by holding people accountable for anti-Semitic acts. The third thing we can all do, regardless of the mandate of this or that city, is we can contribute to the building of a culture of respect for Jews within our societies. A culture, a community that repudiates anti-Semitism. And again, this can be done in many different ways, including through a deliberate effort to celebrate Jewish life and Jewish culture in our societies. And here, for example, look at the experience of Cologne in Germany, where there has been much good practice in this type of work. And finally, and perhaps most importantly of all, regardless of what we do for the Jewish community, let's do it with the Jewish community. This is not about working for them, it is working together in partnership. That way, we can, in a far more meaningful way, understand the issues and the smart responses. Now, as cities across the EU at least embark on all of this work or further intensify it, please count on the Fundamental Rights Agency. We will continue to support you by generating evidence and data, above all else through our periodic surveys. We will also work with you in investment in human rights at the heart of city life, above all else through our support for the Human Rights Cities movement. I wish you very well for this conference.